My name is Kate. I'm a 28-year-old office worker. George, my husband, was my co-worker, and we married a year ago. We've been happily married since then. There were no issues between us, but my in-laws were troublesome. George has 2 older sisters and is the youngest and only son. It seems my in-laws have adored George since he was young. So, when we got engaged, they invited me over to their house to see if I could handle household chores. Luckily, I've always been good at cooking. I had lived alone since I moved out for college, so I had no problem with doing household chores. My Phil doesn't cook at all, and my Mill isn't very good at it, so it's fair to say I captured George's heart through his stomach. While I was cooking in their kitchen, my Mill would complain about things like my cutting techniques or seasoning, but when George praised the dishes, she'd join in the compliments. What's worse was when she said, well, Kate wanted to cook for everyone, so I reluctantly lent her the kitchen. I just had to force a smile, thinking, you're the one pushing this on me. She made comments about my cleaning methods, or kept me asking if I'd continue working after marriage, and even brought up my family background being raised by a single mother. But George, being a bit clueless, said, I don't think you clean poorly, and we'll decide together about your job. I know your father passed away from illness when you were in college. Being raised by a single mother doesn't matter. Hearing that, my in-laws begrudgingly gave their consent to our marriage. But ever after getting married, they kept complaining. Every time we met, my Phil would ask when we're having a child, and if there's any fertility problems on my end. My Mill would come to our house without notice, and eat our food without asking us. She even spilled things on purpose. She'd do these things when George wasn't around. The bullying was getting worse, and I considered telling George, but I worried he might cut ties with them or choose to leave me. I didn't want to risk our relationship because of them, so I had kept quiet. George is suspecting that he probably wouldn't have noticed unless someone told him directly. Once my Mill came to our house, saying I was in the neighborhood and wanted to see Kate. He just believed her. And then he smiled and said, well, if you're done here, you should probably head home. We're about to have dinner. And gently ushered her out. I'll never forget the surprised look on her face as she left. She probably never expected her beloved son to send her away with a smile. I couldn't help but laugh. That's what our relationship looked like. One day, George came home from work and said, Olivia is getting married, and they're having a family dinner this weekend. Can you come with me? My oldest Sil was already married and moved out, but now it was the another Sil, Olivia's turn. Olivia is a nice person, and she still lived with her parents at that point. We both like the same actor and get excited talking about TV shows. But she didn't seem to get along well with her parents, so she often wasn't at home when I visited the in-laws' house. George doesn't know the details, but the dinner will be with my in-laws, oldest Sil and her husband, Olivia and her fiancé, and us, 8 in total. My Phil made a reservation at a fancy restaurant. I had never been to such a fancy restaurant, so I was excited when we arrived at the restaurant on the day. My in-laws had arrived first, and we went in the restaurant together. As I was about to follow George inside, my Mill stopped me. Kate, I left something in the car. Can you fetch it for me? She said that and handed me the car key. You'll understand once you get there, she said, and I headed to the parking lot. I didn't ask where it was parked, and I finally found it parked farthest away. When I opened the door, I found what seemed to be my Mill's purse. I thought she could have just said she forgot her wallet. Then, I saw a paper bag labeled for Olivia on the back seat. It looked like a photo album. She probably brought it to give to Olivia. Without any doubts, I decided to bring the paper bag and the wallet back to the restaurant. The moment I lifted the paper bag, I blurted out, "Wow, it's heavy." But if I hadn't brought it, my Mill would have got mad at me. I placed her wallet inside the paper bag and carried it. Perhaps this is why the car was parked in the farthest spot from the restaurant. Is this some kind of bullying again? I thought as I struggled to carry the heavy paper bag. I thought, why would they bully me on such an important day? I wondered if they thought I wouldn't stand up for myself or that they didn't want to treat me to a meal. Do you have a reservation? When I entered the restaurant with the paper bag, I was led to a small table. Excuse me, I believe we have a reservation for 8 people. The waiter said, "They told me the family consists of 7 people, and you're just a driver and not related, so they asked me to make you seated separately." I was confused, and I asked the waiter to take me to the table where the family sat. When I arrived, George was not there. Actually, there were only my in-laws sitting there. My mill then told the waiter, "Why did you bring a stranger? Our family is only 7 people." I noticed there were only 7 seats. Could this have been the plan all along? Holding the heavy paper bag, I sighed deeply. I no longer wanted to be involved with these people. I even considered divorcing George. Thinking that, I told my in-laws, "Please enjoy your last bit of bullying your DIL." I thought about leaving the restaurant, but I decided to at least greet Olivia. So, I headed back to the small table to sit alone. At that moment, my mill raised her voice hamily. "Hey, that wallet is mine." She stormed over to me, slapped me, and snatched the wallet. The other customers started murmuring, and I panicked. The waiter seemed confused too. My mill then said to the waiter, "She's a thief. Please call the police." Placing the wallet on top of the paper bag must have been a mistake. She probably intentionally left the wallet in the car and asked me to bring it to accuse me of stealing. Maybe she wanted to embarrass me at the restaurant. Or perhaps she wanted to spread rumors about how terrible of a DIL I am in front of the family. I couldn't bear it, so I spoke up for myself. "What are you talking about?" But my in-laws stood their ground. "What's wrong with calling a thief a thief? A DIL like you is an eyesore." With that, my mill pushed me. I fell down, and the contents of the paper bag spilled on the floor. At that moment, I reached my limit and snapped, "Is it fun to bully me like this?" Then, my mill said with a sly grin, "Bullying? That's a bad way to put it. We're just trying to educate you since you clearly didn't get any growing up in a single-mother household." Excuse me. I couldn't believe they were still talking to me like that at this point. Before George and I got married, he explained to them that my dad passed away from an illness when I was in college. My anger just kept growing. Do they want to justify their bullying by calling it education, acting as if they did nothing wrong? "Kate, are you okay?" Just as I mustered the courage to stand up and retort, I heard George's voice. Behind George were my oldest Sil and her husband, Olivia, and a man who seems to be her fiancé. I took George's hand to stand up, hurriedly trying to pick up Olivia's photo album. Then, Olivia rushed over. "Mom, why did you bring this?" As I explained the situation, Olivia looked appalled. "I'll take it when I leave the house. You brought it just to make Kate carry heavy stuff, didn't you?" I thought George and my Phil had already taken their seats in the restaurant, but George went to see Olivia and the others at the parking lot when they arrived. My mill told George I had gone to the restroom, so he didn't suspect anything. When George went to the parking lot to see Olivia and the others and came back to the restaurant, he saw me arguing with my in-laws through the window, so they all hurried in. George asked his parents, "What's going on here? Have you always been bullying Kate?" Hearing this from their beloved son, the in-laws dodged the question. I intervened and began explaining. Apparently, it's not bullying. They called it re-education. They said I was raised poorly because I grew up in a single-mother household. They frequently summoned me to their house, making me clean and cook. My Phil constantly insults me, calling me a worthless DIL because I don't have a child yet. My mill comes to our house without notice to criticize the ways I do my household chores. But I couldn't tell you. Before I could finish, George looked at me with concern. "Why didn't you tell me? You could have told me." My Sil chimed in. "Do you really think it's that easy for her to say?" Right, she might have worried about straining the relationship or even leading to divorce issues. Their points were valid, and George nodded in agreement, then turned to me. "Kate, I'm sorry for not noticing. From now on, you don't have to deal with my parents anymore." And then George continued, "Sorry, Olivia. We're leaving." As I tried to walk away with George, my legs felt weak and I fell. I might have sprained when I fell earlier. Wearing high heels, which I don't usually do, was a bad choice. Just as I was thinking this, George lifted me up. "I need to take you to a hospital." He carried me like a princess. It was a little embarrassing, but my heart was pounding. I was diagnosed with a sprain at the hospital. It was not severe, but I was advised to rest for a while. George and I discussed our next steps. The next day, I visited my in-laws. They were taken aback and refused to let us in. From the entrance, I showed them my medical report. This is the result of you pushing me. I'll be claiming compensation for this. And with that, Mimel gave a snort of laughter. A medical report. So what? Claiming compensation because you fell on your own. It sounds like a scam. Hearing her words, my Phil laughed. Well said. Their attitude fueled my anger. I'll also be demanding you for all the food and wine you took from our house without asking us, and the cleaning costs for the mess you made on our couch when you spilled your drink on purpose. When I presented an invoice summarizing everything up to now, my in-laws just laughed. Are you going to demand all of that? You're so greedy. Yay, you're such a nagging person. I just couldn't contain my anger anymore. What are you talking about? You committed assault and theft. Hearing this, Mimel hit back. Assault and theft charges within a family circle. That sounds extreme, doesn't it? No matter what was said, I had no intention of backing down. I've been enduring because we're family. But not anymore, so I won't hold back. Huh? Are you saying you'll get a divorce? If so, get on with it. At that moment, my car's door opened. My in-laws were taken aback, and when they looked at the car, George was standing there. Why would we get a divorce? I'm just cutting ties with you two. We discussed this yesterday, and Kate agreed. They probably thought no one else was in my car. In front of George, my in-laws showed their true colors. What are you talking about? George's words made my Phil flustered. If George cut ties with you, I can sue you for assault and theft without hesitation. If you don't want that, just pay what we're asking. As George nodded, my in-laws turned pale. They frantically tried to apologize to me. Come on, let's discuss this calmly before making any decisions. Despite their desperate pleas, their actions were interrupted the next moment. Enough is enough. The person who stepped out of the car was Olivia. In fact, I had asked Olivia to be in the car as well. My sister couldn't come today because she's pregnant, but I'm here to speak on her behalf. My sister, George, and I are cutting ties with you too. You two have no common sense. For years, you've pushed household chores onto my sister and I just because we're women. And now that we're gone, you're pushing it onto your DIL. Olivia never did like how Mimel always pushed household chores onto her while Mimel's doing nothing. Apparently, my oldest Sil felt the same. She left the family home early because of it. She got married and was living happily. A few months ago, she found out she was pregnant. But she only told George and Olivia because she didn't want my in-laws to know about it. George, with a chuckle, said she mentioned she didn't want to introduce her baby to you guys because it's a girl. She didn't want her child to be treated like she was. My in-laws were getting very emotional, but when they met my gaze, for some reason, they blamed me. If you hadn't married George, none of this would have happened. I couldn't help but laugh at that comment. Really? At least with my SIL's issues, I'm not involved. And as for what you've done to me, you brought it upon yourselves, right? Hearing this, my Phil noticed something and said, anyway, please come inside. When I looked back, an elderly couple from across the street were looking us from their yard. Realizing this, I spoke clearly. I have no interest in entering a house where I've been bullied. If you don't pay the compensation, I'll consider hiring a lawyer, so I need an answer soon. I got into the car, and as George and Olivia joined me, George said, we might not visit here anymore. Some days later, my in-laws paid the full amount we asked for, but they told me since we've paid, please explain things to our neighbors. Of course, I owe them no such favor. I said, you want me to explain how I was bullied, or how you hurt me? Do you want me to go into all the details? They hastily hung up, saying they don't want to be involved anymore. Apparently, there were rumors going around the neighbors that they bullied their DIL, but they deserved it. I have no idea what happened to them after that. Despite all this, Olivia got her fiancé's understanding, and they got married. My oldest Sil gave birth to a healthy baby girl. After that, we had no contact from George's parents. We used to live near them, but we already moved. Thanks to George supporting me, we didn't get a divorce, and we're living happily together.